I've spent many hours examining and analyzing the Zapruder film, and the evidence it provides in and of itself is telling. Why was there a need to doctor, splice, and yes, even paint frames in it? Why was it kept from public scrutiny for 10 years or more? Who was being protected? The general public or someone operating above the law? The public was not allowed to look at the facts as the people still in authority decided that for them by an appointed commission. If the evidence pointed to one lone deranged gunman, there would be no need to control, edit the films and pictures before they could be released to the public. The de facto evidence should be overwhelming and need no adjustments unless you are going to great lengths to prove something that is not based on the truth. The Warren Commission based a lot of their findings on a few select frames from the Zapruder film. They did not even have the car examined as a crime scene, or investigate simple things like tax returns, which would have been very damning. For example, who financed Lee Harvey Oswald? The guy was all over the world and he didn't even have a driver's license. The commission used this film footage along with a bolt-action rifle to paint a false truth. Remember, this was not a grand jury with regular citizens on it. This was a commission appointed by those that made up the replaced government and was made up of those people above the law. We know that Earl Warren, Gerald Ford, Richard Russell all belonged to a secret society at the time. Allen Dulles, the former CIA director, may also have had ties to the same club. Considering the fact that he was forced to resign by JFK, should have at the very least precluded him from serving on this commission. It took a very narrow investigative path. It had very few public eyewitness accounts, and much of the testimony was not from public sources, but from within 4 organizations: the CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service, and the Dallas Police Department. A very biased, one-sided commission, in my opinion, to review such a very serious matter such as a presidential assassination and a possible coup d'etat. It looked rigged. The film was taken by Abraham Zapruder and was hidden from the general public for many years. At the time of the filming, Zapruder was a 32nd degree Mason and was the only person to be paid for his film. All other films taken were destroyed or clipped and cut so that they reveal nothing of value. They were given back to the individuals in an altered state which should point the finger back to why and for what purpose. In 1975, the Zapruder film was viewed for the first time on network television on a late-night show hosted by Geraldo Rivera called Good Night America. It may have been publicly viewed before that, for the first time in 1970 by a TV station in Detroit on a show hosted by Chuck Collins called Underground News. I believe Zapruder knew the truth of what he had filmed and did feel guilty for what had taken place. He always wanted frame 313 removed from the sequence. This is the frame which showed the graphic detail of a shot coming in from behind, which shows the front of the president's head being massively damaged. If you remove the doctored frame or two, the evidence points to a totally different picture. Zapruder made a lot of money from this film, and I believe he knew that without that frame the whole story and the truth would come out differently. Remember, he was being dragged into a plot which made his ties to a secret society very important. One thing you can count on is that the brothers take care of each other. He had taken oaths and became a 33rd degree Mason shortly after this filming. He did receive a lot of money and his silence was well paid for. He had to have known the difference between the real film he took versus what was left after the powers that be finished their editing. He was forced to comply under a secret society obligation. With any successful assassination, there are certain elements that need to take place. You need to have a plan, a well thought out plot, lots of good hiding places, and good positions in order to ensure 100% success. You also need to have someone to take the blame because you can't deny that a death has taken place, and you need a scapegoat. We find all the elements of this present in the assassination scene of America's 35th President, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The parade route was changed and insisted to pass by Dealey Plaza by none other than Governor John Connally himself. This route was deliberately chosen. Lee Harvey Oswald, a one-time defector, was put into perfect position to become America's most famous assassin. He was given a menial job in the book depository not too long before the assassination. His past fueled all sorts of collusion theories linking him to Russia and Cuba, both considered arch-enemies of the state at the time. Having a route that passed by was essential, and having a storyline to match further corroborated the evidence and gave credibility to the conviction. The usual security service was not present on Kennedy's car to protect him. After the first shot, there was no attempt to shield the president from further harm. The second and third shot, 6 seconds later, still evoked no response. We only saw a response after it was done and the president's wife was trying to climb out from her seat. Her bodyguard came into action and forced her back into the car. Having Lee Harvey Oswald become a patsy and die for his crime before being brought to justice ensured that his story could never be told. He could never answer for all his strange actions. He was guilty before even being charged, as the overwhelming evidence presented pointed to him being the lone gunman and assassin. Most successful assassinations find the assassins at point-blank range with a clear shot at the victims and little collateral damage to others occurring other than the victim dying. No innocent bystanders in the line of fire. This is the truth. This is reality. Follow me down the rabbit trail and you will find truth and reality. A technique of smoke and mirrors was used not only during the event but ever since in the internet to create confusion, illusion, and deception. To make sure that the truth never comes out, the action players in the play have been obscured with paint, blurred, shaded, spliced, or removed from scenes. The only people that really know their identity are on the inside of these organizations that perpetuate the lies and continue to feed the web of deception we still see today with their actions. Realize that the assassination took place at Daley Plaza, the very heart of Dallas. This was located at the very end of the parade route, and the public was told to view the procession from along the streets leading up to this area. The grassy knoll was not filled with crowds of spectators, but was very empty. This site boasted as being the first settlement in Dallas. It was also the first Masonic lodge there and near to the Trinity River, the very heart of Dallas, all quite symbolic. Like the symbolism on the US dollar bill, it is unsure if the location was significant or pure coincidence. So looking at the map, it is important that you see the two islands, one on either side of Main Street between Commerce and Elm. Here you can see the location of Abraham Zapruder on the grassy knoll, and you can see the underpass where all three major roads come back together to pass under the railway tracks. There was some nice parking lots located adjacent to the grassy knoll, lots of nice trees and cement walls with holes in them. A most beautiful spot to plan a controlled event. A perfect place to have an assassination. There was a nice elevation as the grassy knoll is a hill next to the roadway and is an ideal location for filming observation. Parking lot located behind the wall out of the view makes it nice to leave a scene without being followed. Things can't get much better than this. You would expect this would be one place that would be swarming with Secret Service and FBI agents, and maybe it was. Let's begin by looking at all the anomalies present on the Zapruder film. Note there was apparently more than one copy made. The only thing we really know is that they all have some common elements, including frame 313. There certainly is some evidence that some film elements have had different editing applied. It will not make a difference when you see the outcome. All the lies and magical tricks that point to frame 313 as being the most significant frame in the sequence hides the truth of the scene. Negate this frame, and you have an absolutely different picture of the assassination. Follow the rabbit trail and watch closely the anomalies present along the path. The first scene we see shows an anomaly of a rather large skirt that is out of place along the roadway near the grassy knoll. Try count the number of legs under it and it becomes an illusion. How many legs do you see? Is this crowd really there or not? Very little movement in the crowd base from initial filming to when the presidential convoy arrives. Try to follow as we look at it in slow motion. This sequence is very close to when the first shot hits the president in the neck. Again, look at the number of legs under the skirt anomaly and try to count them. It becomes an illusion. How many legs can you see? Notice at the same time we can see a man at the corner tipping his hat just as the president's car passes beside him. Two others step back to the curb at the very same instant. Next we can see some heads appearing behind the cement-holed wall, and immediately after a red cone is placed on the wall. This coincides with the shot that hits the president in the neck when the car is behind the sign. Could this be a signal for a noisemaker or firecracker to be deployed in the grassy knoll for distraction? The president reaches for his neck at the instant the car comes into view again beyond the sign. Coincidence or a well-planned event? I would guess that if someone were shooting the president from the 6th floor of the depository building, that it is not in their view. Clearly more than just Lee Harvey Oswald involved, if he is involved at all. So who was the signal for and why? The cone placement does seem to signal to someone on the grassy knoll on the other side, as it is readily visible in the film taken by Zapruder. Next we see a very serious film splice. Was something edited out? The tree trunk does not fall in line anymore for a frame. What was cut out that we were not supposed to see? This anomaly does not seem to be present in some of the films, but is present in the Time Life one. We are now given a film shot of a possible assassin and possible handgun shot that enters the president's neck. The position of the arm would coincide nicely in line with a possible shot taking place when the president was behind the sign. For some reason, the person in the image retracts the arm and puts it behind the back out of view of everyone. Is this a smoking gun? It does look like Nellie Connolly has herself positioned very close to the front, giving a good pathway for the bullet to come in unrestricted. However, the best neck shot would have come from just in front of the sign out of view of the Abraham Zapruder's camera. The umbrella can just be seen at the edge of the sign. It is unclear with splicing and editing whether or not Kennedy's arm is coming up to instinctively block a shot or is already grabbing his neck as he has just been shot. In the film, we can clearly see President Kennedy and Governor Connolly looking at exactly the same person, the umbrella man. There is also an unidentified man waving his hand high in the air as if to beckon the president to look at him. Again, this is the location of the best unhindered shot and the one closest to make sure it hits its target. Now look at the evidence from an eyewitness account provided shortly after the assassination took place. Jean Hill and Mary Moorman, according to Jean Hill's initial testimony, must have been very close to the presidential car. Let's suppose someone on the grassy knoll threw a firecracker for distraction and made a sound similar to a gunshot. Listen to her story. This testimony comes hours after the shooting and is likely the closest to the truth of what they actually reported on that date. Their stories have changed significantly over the years.
Yes, Mary and I had come down to see the president this morning, and we tried to get a place where we could be away from everyone, and we, I guess, succeeded. As the car came down the hill toward us, he was on our side of the street, and the president and Mrs. Kennedy were in the back seat. They had a little dog between them looking at it, and just as the car came right in line with us, the president looked up, and just as he looked up, 2 shots rang out, and he grabbed his chest, and this real odd look came over his face, and he pitched forward onto her lap. And she jumped up over him at that and screamed and said, "My God, he's been shot." And there was just an instantaneous, sort of an instant's pause, and in the motorcade it momentarily halted, and 3 or 4 more shots rang out, and they sped away real quickly. And by that time I became aware of Mary tugging on my foot saying, "Get down, they're shooting." And it hadn't registered. I'd been so busy looking at the president.
So you were in a very advantageous spot to see the president.
To see the president, but also to get shot.
How do you feel now? It's been several hours later. You've talked to the police. You've given your story several times. Do you still believe that something like this really did happen to you?
I don't think I ever could have believed it unless I had actually seen it. And when I saw the look come across his face, I knew that he'd been hit. But I don't think I could have believed it if I hadn't been right there and hadn't seen it.
Well, you're going to have to talk to the FBI now, and I understand you have some home chores as well.
Breakfast dishes and everything.
I think there are an awful lot of homes here in Dallas that have breakfast dishes to be done today.
Well, that's right. But I made a call to my friend in Oklahoma, and he told our governor of Oklahoma right away. Guess that's the first thing I wanted to do, was get those people in Oklahoma told about it.
Thank you very much.
A very cut-up piece from the Weigman film can be seen. We see a man and a woman on the grassy knoll quite near Zapruder in the position he filmed from. He gets up, takes 2 objects with him to the shadow of the wall, and merges the 2 items while facing the wall. The clip is quickly cut so we don't see what he did. Maybe he had a noisemaker or firecracker to create a distraction. Did he throw it through the wall? What were the ladies in the grassy knoll doing as well? We can only speculate and wonder why these films were hastily cut off or why they even exist. What were we not supposed to see that was so important to have to edit them? Maybe these films were added later to create confusion and doubt. We are assumed to believe that they come from the scene of the assassination. It is by inference only that we can draw any conclusion from them. Follow along as we continue to roll the Zapruder film. Look at the dust highlighted on the trunk. We can see what looks like dust rolling across the trunk. Is this part of film editing or to create more smoke? We are not sure. Possible missed shots? I really doubt it, and I think if they were put in there, it's just to add more controversy. Maybe to say that the whole film has been made up. It certainly looks like editing, as there is no reason to link it with any shots from the eyewitnesses present at the scene. Again, look at the film in slow motion to observe these film anomalies. The car was never been examined as a crime scene after the assassination. I wonder why not. We see a couple in the background clapping as if nothing has just happened. Remember the Jean Hill testimony? According to modern folklore, they are about 150 feet ahead and on the other side of the road from where she said they were. She said they were on the same side as the president and saw the president grab his neck right in front of them. The truth is there are two hoods acting as signalmen. The driver is told to look for a signal from the man standing beside a lady in red. If the man opens up his trench coat and shows his leg, you need to bring the vehicle to a stop by the white marker in the grass. Note that the driver's head is not clearly shown in the film. There is an illusion maintained as to whether he's looking back at Kennedy, a face drawn into the blurred hair, or he's actually very carefully lining himself up to halt the motorcade at precisely the ordered position. Let us suppose we use a magician's trick and add in some doctored film, namely the headshot to finger Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone assassin. It has to come from the building behind, and from the 6th floor of the depository building according to the storyline. Look at this with an open mind. What do we need to show? We need to show the front of the president's head being blown out. Anyone with ballistics experience, such as a common hunter, knows that the force of the bullet will push the object in the same direction as the bullet and that the exit hole will be larger than the entrance hole. Consider that argument. If nothing has happened yet other than a small neck wound to the president, how do you present the evidence? You must have the explosion of his head come out the front. You also would expect the head to fly forward at the very same instant. The Warren Commission evidence is a contradiction to what you see take place. This frame is the premise by which Lee Harvey Oswald was convicted, frame 313. If you look at frames before and after this frame, the evidence is not there. It is little wonder Zapruder felt guilty for having this frame put into all his films and copies, leading to an innocent man's conviction. Money or conscience? If you look closely and examine all the evidence, you'll realize that this frame and a few surrounding ones were painted in to substantiate their proof of Lee Harvey Oswald being the lone gunman. Taking this away, you'd have to look for the real killers, and yes, it would have to be a very large event, including those that played with the evidence. Secret Service, politicians, FBI, all would be fingered. It is little wonder that leaked documents by Hoover have stated that it is imperative that Lee Harvey Oswald is implicated as the lone gunman. If the actual head blew up at frame 313, you would not have seen Jacqueline Kennedy still trying to help her husband after that time. He was still very much alive and conscious after frame 313. It was after the revealing headshot at frame 329 that she decides to bail out of the car. Follow the sequence once more. The driver gets cue, lines up spot in grass, slows down almost to a stop. JFK sees assassin in front of car hood, winces back and raises his arm to try and instinctively block the shot. The first front assassin's bullet came in through the front windshield at frame 322. It hits JFK in the chest. Look at the glass spray in the windshield. Look at it again in slow motion. Consider that if someone was shot through the back of the head, the impact would push the body forward and there would be no arm movements anymore. He would be dead. Consider if he had a neck wound and was still conscious, and that secondly that he can see the assassin in front of the car hood. Assume Connolly and Kellerman are ducked out below seat level. What reaction would you have? Here we see his reaction. He sees the assassin, he sees the gun, he winces back in self-defense and raises his arm to try block the shot. He is now unconscious. To make sure he is dead, he is shot one more time in the head with the same handgun, half a second later at about frame 329. The president is definitely dead. As soon as he slumps, Jacqueline sees the real horror and realizes that she might be next and decides to bail. I would never doubt Jacqueline Kennedy's reaction. Would you not react exactly the same way if you were being shot at? The president and her were sitting ducks with no protection at all. Notice that Connolly and front seat Secret Serviceman Kellerman must have been out of the line of fire. The editing of this film was done extremely well and it is well masked. Kellerman is also deceptively blended in nicely with the driver Greer. At certain times, however, you know he is not there, but ducked behind dash. Very elusive film editing was done. You can also see Driver Greer wince when the bullets come through the windshield. That is instinct. It must have taken a long time to create the illusion, blending Nellie Connolly's hair and flowers and painting in a pseudo-Connolly as well to make it look like he was still sitting upright. Where is Governor Connolly actually when this is all taking place? It is a great illusion. They spent a lot of time working on Connolly and made sure the backside of his head blended in nicely with the corner post behind Driver Greer. His front gray hair also worked well to hide amongst the flower bouquet held by Nellie Connolly. Before that, parts of his body show him to be below seat level and out of the line of fire. In the end, he is not unconscious, but is very visible if you look closely at the seat right in front of Nellie. He is definitely not on Nellie's lap, face side up. As we see the car continue, Connolly raises his head once more from Nellie's corner near Greer's seat and hides in the shadow, but clearly visible. Next, we get to see the assassin. I would really like to know his identity, as he was the one who administered the kill shots. We have evidence presented by several eyewitnesses that say the motorcade came to a stop. This was enough time for the hitman to shoot 2 bullets half a second apart from a handgun and then get out of the way of the car. A bag lays close by where he can put the weapon if he so chooses. Notice no reaction by the man next to the car while the hitman does his maneuver. Really? Oblivious to what has just taken place? Unbelievable to say the least. Does anyone know who that man was? He seems to be a complete mystery. Some say it was Malcolm Summers. If you look at the History Channel interview in 2002, you will find it is not true. He is a very noteworthy eyewitness, though, and we will look at the interview later. In some of the other footage of the day, we see it looks like the cars in the following procession veer over and pull up towards the hitman's last position and stop. Could we speculate that the hitman or weapon itself could have been picked up before the crowds arrived? That clip is not from the Zapruder film and was heavily cut by someone, which makes it noteworthy. Certainly, if you follow my conclusion that Greer, Kellerman, and Connolly were all part of the charade, then it can involve many other agents who were present at the scene and had guns. The hitman could just blend in with the rest, no need to run, as he was surrounded by friends. The motorcycle stops by the assassin's point of entry into the scene. He stops by the storm drain. Was the gun used, an automatic or a regular revolver? Maybe there is casings to pick up or throw down the drain. Coincidence, or was he there to remove evidence from the scene? We will not know. Certainly, if something needed to be done, he was in the right place. From postings on the internet, you can find Connolly's suit jacket and shirt. Holes are located off to one side, although we are told that the bullet or bullets that hit him fractured ribs, broke his wrist, and some fragments were left in his thigh. He was pretty much a goner if you listen to his wife Nellie, who helped save his life. By her description, I would suspect that he'd be in rather rough shape at his first interview given to the media only 5 days later. She gave her vivid account by interview of the event many years later. Here it is.
I didn't know what to do for John, but I knew I was the only thing he had there. And I decided if I could just get him out of the line of fire, that would be better. So I pulled him over into my lap. And he was face up.
This is your husband?
Yes, and he is bleeding profusely, and he has a big wound about the size of a baseball in his chest.
Oh.
I didn't know what to do, but his hand was on it, and so I put my hand on his and just hoped. The third shot came, and I couldn't turn around because of the weight of my husband on my lap. But I heard Jackie say, "They've killed my husband. I have his brains in my hand."
Oh.
And then all around us, all over the car, was a bloody mass of, it looked like buckshot.
Governor John Connolly was obviously a very strong man and gave his first speech a mere 5 days later from the hospital bed. He had no trouble breathing and had a complete miracle recovery other than a wrist and finger injury. He had a nurse present at all times just in case she was needed. He even managed to give a pretty good stump speech from his bed, including a philosophical discussion of the event.
Governor Connolly, what are your recollections of those terrible moments when you and President Kennedy were shot?
Martin, just before it occurred, of course, we'd had a great morning in Fort Worth, a magnificent breakfast. We spoke in a slight drizzle. We made the trip to Dallas, huge throngs along the way. We got into downtown Dallas. There were tremendous crowds, real warmth, real understanding, real appreciation. And Nellie and I saw it so vividly because we were riding in the car with them. We did not attempt to acknowledge the obvious ovation that they were getting because we knew it was for the Kennedys. The reception had been magnificent. The president had remarked on it, so had Miss Kennedy. As a matter of fact, I guess not 30 seconds before the tragic incident occurred, Nellie had turned to the president and said, "Mr. President, they can't make you believe now that there are not some in Dallas who love you and appreciate you, can they?" And he said, "No, they sure can't." And then we had just turned the corner. We heard a shot. I turned to my left. I was sitting in the jump seat. I turned to my left to look in the back seat. The president had slumped. He had said nothing. Almost simultaneously, as I turned, I was hit. And I knew I'd been hit badly. And I said, I knew the president had been hit, and I said, "My God, they're going to kill us all." And then there was a third shot, and the president was hit again. And we thought then very seriously. I had still regained consciousness, but the president had slumped in Miss Kennedy's lap, and when he was hit the second time, she said, or the first time, it all happened in such a brief span, she said, "Oh my God, they killed my husband." I said, Jack. And then after the third shot, the next thing that occurred, I was conscious. The Secret Service man, of course, the chauffeur had pulled out of the line. They said, "Get out of here." On the radios, they said, "Get us to a hospital immediately." And so we pulled out, of course, immediately as fast as we could go and got to the hospital. And in the space of a few seconds, it's unbelievable what can happen. Martin, we went from great joy, anticipation, wonderful crowds, wonderful throngs, to great tragedy.
Governor, what are the thoughts that have come to you as you've lain here in this hospital bed recovering from your wounds?
Oh, Martin, there have been many and many subjects, and I just wonder. You wonder all types of things. You wonder why his life was taken, why my life was spared, and I know, of course, that some now speculate that, well, it was me the man was after, not him. Of course, I have been campaigning all over Texas, all last year for 11 months, all this year riding parades, horseback, in cars, open cars, on street corners. I could have been an easy prey for anyone with no security whatever. So I don't place any stead in this, except I think the man did what he intended to do, shoot both of us. And that's the only thing I can think.
What other reflections have you had, Governor?
Only that maybe, Martin, that the President of the United States, as a result of this great tragedy, has been asked to do something in death that he couldn't do in life. And that is to so shock and so stun a nation, and the people, and the world, of what's happening to us, of the cancerous growth that's being permitted to expand and enlarge itself upon the community and the society in which we live, that breeds a hatred, a bigotry, an intolerance, an indifference, a lawlessness that is, I think, really an outward manifestation of what occurred here in Dallas. It could have occurred in any other city in America. It is nothing more than a manifestation of an extremism on both sides that basically is the genesis of our self-destruction if we're ever going to be destroyed. I'm not the least fearful of any foreign enemy, so long as we have within ourselves not hate, but human understanding, not passion and prejudice, but reason and tolerance, and not ignorance, but knowledge, and the willingness to use that knowledge. This is the only answer I can give Martin why he's gone and I'm not.
So who is the hitman? There are many that have tried to connect him with Malcolm Summers. That is a rabbit trail. Why was JFK killed? There are a number of reasons, and we will view his speech, which would indicate that he stood for honesty and integrity, and possibly even morality if you listen to it. He said he was going to clean up the government. Remember, he did not support the Bay of Pigs invasion, and in fact was blamed for its failure. He fired the CIA director, Allen Dulles, as a result, and vowed to clean up the organizations. He asked for honesty from the media and to report even anything he did wrong. He wanted truth, not propaganda. The CIA had planned an overthrow of Cuban dictator Fidel Castro. A lot of big players had invested millions into the place and were hoping that with an overthrow of the government, their investment would pay huge returns, oil fields and so on. Most of these people had their roots at Dallas. We know that there have been and still are many ties to the lucrative oil fields by the rich. The Bush dynasty and the Rockefellers, to name a few, have made their fortunes there. Not saying they were involved, but certainly gives credence to the assassination possibility. Was JFK later framed as a ladies' man? Marilyn Monroe and so on? His father Joe certainly had shady roots as well and tied to the mafia. So why kill him? Think about it and let's look at real eyewitness interview of a common man positioned on the grassy knoll. Like Gene Hill and Mary Goodman, it appeared that they would like to portray Malcolm Summers as the man that rolled out of the way of the presidential car. He actually was a key witness whose testimony was not considered by the authorities to be newsworthy at the time. Like others, certainly after many years of media influence, it was influenced by the portrayal of the events as facts. However, his position on the grassy knoll and his statement that the motorcade momentarily halted matched the sequence of events required.
I ran on over by myself because it was a shortcut across the grassy knoll. What put me down there so close to the car and the assassination site.
Okay, let's make sure we've got the terminology straight. The grassy knoll is the area up on the hill by the fence. You were down on the grass by the street.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm sorry I referred to it, but I cut across the two islands somewhat out there, separated between Maine, Commerce, and Elm.
Okay, so you got out there, what, a few minutes ahead of time?
I got out there probably at least 5 minutes ahead.
The parade was getting pretty close.
Yes, I knew it was coming close. I knew I was in. I got closer to the curb where I could be. There was nothing in between me and the curb and their car where they was going to drive by. Yes, and I wanted to be as close as I could.
How close to the curb do you think you were?
I was within 5 feet of the curb.
Okay, so what happened next?
Well, did he get hit? I heard Connolly say, they're going to kill us all or shoot us all. I'm not sure which one on that deal. And then I heard Jackie Kennedy scream out, "Oh God, no, no, no." And it was a shrill, it was very sad to hear that if you think back. It was just eerie. And I mean, that's the way she said, "Oh God, no, no." And then there was a motorcycle cop right coming along on the side, leading the caravan there, the car. And he laid down his bike right in front of me and looked straight in my direction. And like he's going to pull his gun. Well, but he's looking at me, and I knew he wasn't looking at me, but I mean in my direction. I thought, well, somebody behind me was doing the firing. And because I thought that, well, I fell down, I hit the ground, I kind of stayed on my hand somewhat, where I could still see in the car, but not, be standing up. And then he jumped back on his bike, and then he took off along with a car and everything. I guess it was his job to get to the hospital with him, and he certainly did, maybe. And that whole area was full of squad car. Well, I did not know the reason why they was all full of squad car, that area, and I'm talking about 15 or 20, it appeared to be. I thought they had a gunman cornered out there somewhere. Well, the Tippett was shot in the 400 block of East 10th Street, and that was only 2 blocks from where I live, and went over there. And so it was still a bunch of excitement and a lot of things going on. And then they didn't find him when I saw him, because later on they found him at the Texas Theater over there. So I run back to my house, and it was just horrible. I began to feel bad. I began to be almost sick because it happened in Dallas. There again, when I said I was on the Dallas side. And I watched TV, I guess, practically all night long about it, and listened to everything I could. So,
what you saw when the assassination happened.
all right.
Can you explain better about the shooting itself? I mean, you heard 3 shots?
I heard 3 shots.
Not 4, not 2?
No, 3 shots, yeah.
You're pretty certain of that?
I'm certain.
Okay. And how were they spaced?
I'd say the first one was like it sounded like a firecracker. Well, and then if you guess the time, I don't know how to say how many seconds, but the second one and third one was the closest together of all. And that was where when Connolly said they're going to shoot us all or kill us all, well, that's when I thought it was more than one person involved for sure, because he said they. And certainly it sounded like they were that many shots.
I think in your earlier description, I think you said that the first 2 shots were closer together.
Well, no, I misstated that really because it was the second and third. I misstated that, a little bit nervous.
Tell you what, I don't know if you've seen the film. One of the other witnesses was asked to do this. Can you kind of knock on the table, that kind of thing, to tell us how, to give an impression of how these shots were spaced out?
Yeah, I'd say like that, and then like that. I would say that was basically what, vivid to me.
And did you have any idea where they were coming from?
No, I had no idea, because I didn't have time to think about an idea. The only thing it was is because that cop come off his bike there, suggested that the guy was behind me. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, said, you were there about 5 minutes ahead of time. Could you have looked up and seen that 6th floor window? And I said, yeah, I certainly could have. And I said, if I'd have seen somebody up there with a shotgun, a rifle, I would have not thought a second about it. They wouldn't know if I would have hollered or I notified somebody. I said, absolutely not, because I've read where the FBI guards the president on every route he takes, and they on top of buildings and places like that, protecting him. And I said, that would have been exactly what I thought, even if I'd have looked up and seen someone in that 6th floor window. I would not have said anything, not because of fear or anything, it's just because I thought it was supposed to be. But I do know that it was a few minutes before they all cleared out. And then I do know that the car itself that Kennedy was in, it hesitated and stopped there for a second or two. And I saw the Secret Service man run up there, and he slipped on the back bumper. At the time, I did not know he was slipping on that back bumper, because I thought he was just trying to dive in the car. But he wasn't trying to dive, and that's where they saw Jackie Kennedy reach for him. And I've heard some people say she was trying to get out of there. That's not so at all.
Someone years later tried to imitate Malcolm Summers and show him as running across from the island to the grassy knoll after the shooting. Sorry, it doesn't match the testimony. He was dead in 2004, and that clip came out in 2014. Look at the facts. Which rabbit trail is a painted path and which one is a real one based on the logic? Do you still believe in a lone gunman theory? You need to question who wanted you to believe this and why. Do you believe that there's no way you can have so many involved and not have someone step forward and tell the truth? Look at the Manhattan Project involving at least 100,000 people. Did it remain well hid? Do you believe there was a reason for Pearl Harbor, North Korea, Vietnam, and the Middle East meddling, or are they just chance events? Closer to home, how about Waco, Texas, Las Vegas shootings, and the Texas church massacre? Think about it. Why is mass immigration into the country encouraged when you know terrorists will come in as well? Does Second Amendment rights enter in? The right to bear arms? Is this part of a humanitarian movement or a way and means of control and power? Think about it. Why hide the truth? There should be no need to hide the facts if they support the story. Even financial collapse at Wall Street should be questioned. As well, politicians, bribes, and sex scandals. No one is forced to step down or do time in jail. All payouts funded by the taxpayer. Who pulls the puppet strings? Is the same organizations or organization that perpetrated the JFK event still alive and well and at work today? What influence did the media play in all this? Is this what is called managed perception or managed deception?
ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Why did this president have to die? Who benefited? Obviously, the fingers point to those who took power or those people who were above the election process, or both. The Constitution protecting individual rights needs to be protected from those unelected people. They should be foiled out. They are the masterminds of the system and answer only to themselves. The media will never investigate because you can very easily end up like the president. Deep state, shadow governments, these are the ones to fear. If you hear of someone committing suicide with 2 bullet holes to the back of the head, understand. These people rule by fear. The killing of a president was a very stiff warning that insubordination will not be tolerated. We have the gold, and therefore we make the rules. If Kennedy meant what he said in his speech, you would have to agree that he meant well for his country and wished no harm to the individual. His government and ideology was overthrown by this assassination. By any other words, it was a coup d'etat. The crime scene wasn't properly investigated by police. Without looking at the car, you only have planted evidence available and controlled rhetoric. The car was the crime scene and it wasn't examined. Whoever did the investigation was not looking for justice, but was operating at a level above the law. The car was removed from Dallas very quickly without investigation. Surprisingly enough, although heavily edited, the Zapruder film remained. All other films confiscated were cut and edited at very convenient places to show nothing of the crime scene and then given back to their owners. I would have to assume that the painting of the headshot at frame 313 was the key evidence and the only way to show a bullet coming from behind. Planting a gun was the only evidence needed then to link Lee Harvey Oswald as being the lone gunman. They had almost 8 years to embellish the rest of the film before releasing. They really had no evidence other than what they planted or what they conspired to release. To make sure, they killed Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby before they could give their testimonies or expose their ties back to them. Oswald claimed his innocence and his wife did too. He asked for a lawyer but none was given. If we look at his tax returns, you might be able to see where his paychecks came from and see if he was paid by Russia, Cuba, CIA, or exactly who. Unfortunately, those will have been destroyed as that would be telling evidence. I would be very surprised if that remains to come out when the final withheld documents will be released by the government. That would be a huge smoking gun. More interest in the Cuban rabbit trail and determining what Oswald was doing there rather than looking at the truth will likely occur. It took 3 days to see the plot transpire from the Zapruder film. Amazingly, it has been covered up now for 54 years. Don't expect the media to question or seek the truth. They are there to maintain the status quo. They are key players of the game of managed perception, confusion, and deception. They are paid players, so don't expect them to bite the hand that is feeding them. How long will it take to unmask the 9/11 cover-up? It will be hard to say. Most of the evidence was quickly destroyed and not much left except the smoke. I leave you with a few words of advice. Don't believe all that you are told and try to keep your freedoms and liberties as long as you can. The Bible speaks of the great deception, and this is the time that we are living in now. Is the United States of America a democracy, a republic, or just a military power? A strong arm of the puppet masters to beat the world into submission. You be the judge. Remember, everything is a rich man's trick. Someone is pulling the strings, and this is a rich man's world. Be careful and stay alive. Thanks for watching.